You told me you wanted to run after that girl.
Whether we're talking movies, comics, or animated series, Spider-Man actually has an amazing lineup of villains. From the Green Goblin to Venom and Doc Octopus, everyone knows the big bad guys. But underneath all of that fame, there's a bunch of overlooked and underrated villains who could really challenge Spidey. These characters have interesting backstories, powers that are terrifying, and a ton of potential that hasn't yet been explored, but for some reason, they've been stuck on the sidelines. In this video, we'll be exploring 20 underrated Spider-Man villains, all the way from those who almost became popular to those that even die-hard fans might forget. So grab your web shooters and let's swing through the forgotten corners of Spidey's world, because it's time these villains finally got the recognition they deserve.
This is the Chameleon.
The Chameleon. Before there was Venom or Doctor Octopus, there was the Chameleon, Spider-Man's very first villain, debuting in Amazing Spider-Man #1 in 1963. Dmitry Smerdyakov, aka Chameleon, was born in Russia and is the half-brother of a man named Sergei Kravenov, who would later be known as Kraven the Hunter. From a young age, Dmitry faced a lot of pain and rejection in his family. His father disliked him, and his mother saw him as a disappointment. The only family member who showed him a little kindness was Sergei, but even he treated Dmitry poorly. Desperate to gain Sergei's approval, Dmitry would entertain him by mimicking the voices and mannerisms of people in their neighborhood. This behavior stemmed from deep emotional wounds, and as a result, Dmitry struggled with his own sense of identity, often convincing himself that he and Sergei were true friends, despite the hurtful dynamic between them. Dmitry was first mentored by Gustav Fier's brother, Karl, the Finisher, in the covert arts. He was trained in Fier's academy to become chameleons, expert impersonators and sleeper agents. In fact, Dmitry would later become the one and only Chameleon. At first, the Chameleon didn't have any special powers, so he used costumes and makeup to conceal his identity and wore a multi-pocket disguise vest to store materials for quick transformations. Over time, however, he gained some unique abilities that allowed him to change his appearance into that of any person he wanted. This change comes from a special serum that has been used to modify his skin, giving him the ability to shift his look at will. He also wears a special type of fabric that can adjust to his body's signals, enabling him to wear any costume he chooses. One of the key tools the Chameleon uses is a special belt. This belt has three main functions. First, it has a camera that captures the looks of different people and sends that information to a device that helps recreate their appearance. The belt can store many different looks, so when he wants to become someone else, he just has to enter a code. Once he does, the belt sends signals that change his skin and appearance along with his clothing, allowing him to perfectly transform into anyone else. In a world where everyone's worried about information warfare and identity theft, a new take on Chameleon could be pretty interesting. Imagine an espionage thriller where Spider-Man goes up against an enemy who can literally pretend to be anyone. The Jackal. Professor Miles Warren first appeared in Amazing Spider-Man #31 back in 1965. He used to be a biochemistry professor at Empire State University and learned about genetics from the High Evolutionary himself. But things didn't go so well for him. He got kicked out of the Evolutionary's place because he was kind of unstable. And I mean, coming from the High Evolutionary, that's saying something. Warren received additional training and equipment from a group called Maelstrom. At one point, he developed feelings for one of his students, Gwen Stacy, who was dating Peter Parker. Tragically, after Gwen was killed by the Green Goblin, Warren lost his grip on reality and began to blame Spider-Man for her death. Driven by his sadness, he found out that his lab assistant had cloned a frog. This inspired him to use the technology to bring back Gwen. He started experimenting with human cloning, using tissue samples from both Gwen and Peter. When his assistant confronted him about the unethical experiments, Warren accidentally killed him. Unable to accept the blame, he created the Jackal persona to hide his guilt. He trained in martial arts, made a green suit with clawed gloves, and became a criminal mastermind to seek revenge on Spider-Man. His experiments were what kicked off the infamous clone saga, making him the guy behind Ben Reilly and Kane, two prominent Spider-Man clones. With all the buzz around cloning, biotech, and AI ethics in the news these days, a modern Jackal story could dive into the dangerous obsession people have. It could show how grief and genius blurs the lines between creation and corruption, and that could be explored in the new Spider-Man adaptations, if they're interested.
I am L. Thompson Lincoln.
Please, you're the...
Tombstone. Lonnie Lincoln first showed up in Spider-Man number 36 way back in November 1987. He grew up in Harlem, New York City, and as an albino, who has no pigment in his skin, he was kind of an outsider among the other kids. On top of that, he had some issues with his vocal cords which made him want to speak in whispers. The only kid who didn't treat him poorly was Joe Robertson, who wanted to be a reporter. Lonnie took Joe's kindness as a sign of friendship, even though that wasn't really the case. Lonnie wanted to change how people saw him, so he started working out a lot and became very strong. Unfortunately, he used his size to intimidate others and became a bully in school. His classmates gave him the nickname Tombstone because of his tough demeanor. In his senior year, Tombstone felt betrayed when he learned that Robertson was writing an expose about him for the school newspaper. To make Robbie drop the story, Tombstone assaulted him. Tombstone really went from being just a schoolyard bully to one of the toughest crime bosses in New York. He's got that raw, street-level vibe that fits perfectly in any Spider-Man story. We would love to see this guy in a darker, crime-driven adaptation, something with a vibe like Daredevil or The Batman. Shocker! The Shocker, whose real name is Herman Schultz, first showed up in Amazing Spider-Man number 46 back in December 1966. After his parents passed away when he and his younger brother Marty were kids, Schultz started down a path of crime. But it didn't take long for him to realize he wasn't really cut out for it, because he ended up getting arrested a bunch of times. After a robbery went wrong, Herman found himself arrested once again. This time, while in prison, he discovered a way to use the tools and materials around him to create special gauntlets. These gauntlets had the power to send out strong vibrations that helped him open safes more easily, giving him an advantage over the police. He took on the name Shocker because he could shock his enemies with handheld devices that produced these strong vibrations. However, these vibrations were so powerful that he had to wear a heavy protective padded suit. During his first outing as Shocker, he unexpectedly encountered Spider-Man and managed to defeat him, possibly because Spider-Man had a broken arm at the time. Shocker is a skilled safecracker and knows street fighting techniques. Unlike many villains who seek revenge or have an ideology, he just wants to make some money. His suit may look odd, but it is practical. It absorbs the force from his own shockwaves. Shocker often gets seen as comic relief, but he could totally be thought of as a real threat. Imagine him as a clever, desperate guy who knows physics inside and out. In a more realistic Spider-Man story, Shocker could represent the everyman villain, smart, dangerous, and surprisingly relatable, and that could be very interesting.
Well, this is new. Hello?
The Spot. Dr. Jonathan Owen, later known as The Spot, was created by Al Milgrom and Herb Trimpe and made his first appearance back in 1985 in The Spectacular Spider-Man number 94. Johnny's early life was a combination of being super smart and dealing with personal issues. He had a natural curiosity and a sharp mind, showing his talent for science from a young age. As a child, he loved exploring the mysteries of the universe. He spent a lot of time doing experiments and playing with gadgets in his homemade lab. This passion eventually led him to MIT, where his genius quickly stood out to both his classmates and professors. Dr. Owen was working for Kingpin at one point, and after the Answer was killed, Kingpin asked Owen to create a new superhuman with powers like Cloak. But during the experiment, something went wrong, and Owen ended up in a strange place called Spot World. He eventually returned, but found himself covered in spots which were actually portable space warps back to Spot World. He began thinking he could use his powers to defeat anyone in battle. When Spider-Man and the Black Cat confronted the Kingpin, he appeared and introduced himself as the Spot. Spider-Man laughed at the name and fell onto the roof, but the Spot won their first fight and warned the heroes to stay away from the Kingpin. Later, he lost a second battle against Spider-Man. He had thrown too many of his spots as weapons and didn't keep enough to protect himself. After getting taken down by Spider-Man for the first time, Spot's confidence took a major hit. Because of that, he ended up losing a bunch of times and became kind of a laughingstock among the superhuman crowd. When he was trapped in Spot World for an unknown period, Spot became increasingly unhinged. Fueled by a desire for vengeance against a crime lord for injuring his estranged son, the Spot returned more dangerous and focused than ever, transforming from a petty thief into a near unstoppable assassin.
Now I could have anything in the world.
6. Hydro Man. Morris Bench, later known as Hydro Man, first popped up in Amazing Spider-Man number 212 back in October 1980. He grew up in the Bronx in New York and started working as a crewman on a cargo ship. While a powerful experimental generator was being lowered into the ocean, Bench was accidentally knocked overboard by Spider-Man. As he fell into the water, he was exposed to the generator's energy and surrounding volcanic gases, which dramatically changed his body on a cellular level. When he was rescued, he started to notice that he was leaking a lot of water, which he initially thought was just sweat. Frustrated by the constant dripping, Bench went to a local pub looking for some excitement. To his surprise, he discovered that he could turn his entire body into liquid. After discovering his powers, Hydro Man wanted to find the people he blamed for what happened to him and make them pay. He eventually fought Spider-Man. During their second fight, Spider-Man defeated Hydro Man by spreading the core of his body apart far enough that Hydro Man couldn't come back together before evaporating. If you think about it, Hydro Man could totally make a splash on the big screen. His water powers are perfect for some seriously cool visuals. With all the effects-heavy movies coming out these days, he could really bring the drama and be a force of nature with his elemental powers, quite literally. Morbius, the living vampire. Michael Morbius first showed up in Amazing Spider-Man number 101 back in July 1971. He grew up in Nafplio, Greece, and had a pretty lonely childhood because of a rare blood condition. Even with his health issues, he was super smart and spent a lot of time getting lost in books. While in college, Michael and his friend Emil became successful scientists and won a Nobel Prize for their work in biochemistry. They tried to cure a blood disease and developed an experimental treatment using vampire bats and electroshocks. To save his own life, he had to use the vampire bat DNA cure, which mutated him into a blood-sucking creature of the night, making him a pseudo-vampire. This was the birth of Morbius, the living vampire, who stalks the streets at night. One of the main side effects of his vampirism was that he had to drink blood to stay alive, and he developed other typical vampire traits. This included being sensitive to sunlight and gaining special abilities like flying, increased strength, speed, and a quick healing ability. His looks also changed. He grew fangs, his nose became flatter and more bat-like, and his skin turned very pale. Additionally, anybody he bit would also transform into a vampire. At first, Morbius was a villain who went up against Spider-Man and Blade, but he eventually became kind of a vigilante. He's been dealing with this crazy craving for blood while trying to find a way to fix the awful condition he's in. He's not just an evil monster, he's a guy who wanted to live a normal life but ended up ruining himself instead. The 2022 movie didn't really capture that vibe, but a story that integrates his scientific side with the horror could really showcase what makes him interesting.
Hey, buddy, where do you think you're going? Anywhere I want.
8. Hammerhead. Hammerhead, or Joseph Lorenzini, stands out as a combination of a classic 1920s mobster and a supervillain with a head that's almost impossible to break. His strong commitment to an old-school criminal vibe makes him a fascinating throwback in the modern New York underworld. Joseph was born in Russia and later moved to Italy with his family. He grew up with an abusive father and eventually became a junior hitman for the Maggia crime syndicate. After a brutal fight, his skull was shattered. A disgraced surgeon named Jonas Harrow found him. While Joseph was unconscious, Harrow replaced most of his broken skull with a strong steel alloy. When Joseph woke up with amnesia, he focused on a poster for the movie, The Al Capone Mob, he had seen in an alley. He adopted the persona, clothing, and speech of a Prohibition-era gangster and became known as Hammerhead. Hammerhead has a surgically implanted steel skull plate, making it nearly indestructible and usable as a battering ram. This metal skull allows him to survive impacts and gunshots that would be fatal to ordinary humans. In some iterations, he has an adamantium endoskeleton, giving him superhuman strength and durability. As a skilled brawler and marksman, he often employs vintage weapons like Tommy guns and is a cunning strategist and leader within the Maggia. Hammerhead often gets overlooked because his obsession with the past makes him seem one-dimensional, an almost comical villain compared to more layered bad guys like Kingpin or Dr. Octopus. But underneath that tough exterior, there's a really interesting psychological twist that adds depth to his character, integrating the gritty vibe of organized crime with the superhero action we love. Stegron, the Dinosaur Man. Dr. Vincent Stegron used to work as an assistant to Dr. Kurt Connors on a SHIELD project that involved using dinosaur tissue brought in by Kazar from the Savage Land. He first popped up in Marvel Team-Up number 19 back in December 1973. While working with Connors, Vincent became obsessed with experiments involving lizards and decided to steal a special dinosaur formula. He ran away to the Savage Land and took this formula, mixed with dinosaur DNA, transforming himself into a creature known as Dinosaur Man. Doc Connors, the scientist behind the formula, reached out to Spider-Man for help. Spider-Man traveled to the Savage Land, teamed up with Kazar, and discovered Stegron, who had turned into a reptilian creature and was in charge of a group known as the Swamp Men. After Spider-Man and Kazar defeated Stegron's followers, the villain escaped to New York City on a flying ship. Once there, Stegron led a chaotic charge of dinosaurs down Broadway. He was eventually stopped by Spider-Man and the Black Panther, and when he tried to flee on the back of a flying dinosaur, Spidey knocked him into the water where he quickly sank. Now that we have all this buzz around bringing extinct species back to life and messing with genetics, Stegron could really serve as a modern-day warning about overconfidence. With the tech we have now, Stegron could look amazing and carry a strong message, like a shout from the past reminding us about the risks of our own arrogance. Boomerang. Fred Myers first popped up in Tales to Astonish 81 back in April 1966. He was born in Australia but moved to the US when he was just a kid. Once in America, he fell in love with baseball and honed his amazing pitching skills. He kicked off his career as a professional player in the minor leagues after finishing high school, and a few years later, he made it to the major leagues. But not long after, he got suspended for taking bribes. Angry and frustrated, he eventually joined a criminal group called the Secret Empire. They hired him and created special weapons for him to use his pitching skills. He became their operative known as Boomerang, and one of the first heroes he fought was the Hulk. I'm sure you can imagine how that went. However, after the Secret Empire fell apart, Boomerang went to Australia to hide and recover. He practiced throwing and decided to become a freelance assassin. With new weapons paid for by underworld financier Justin Hammer, Boomerang returned to America to chase his criminal goals. His first mission was to kill Iron Fist, but he was defeated. He was later recruited by a group called the Evil Defenders, working for a character named Libra, to fight against another group known as the Defenders. At one point, he was hired by a villain named Viper to help carry out a plan against S.H.I.E.L.D., which led to him clashing with well-known heroes like Spider-Man, Nick Fury, Shang-Chi, and the Black Widow. In an attempt to impress the powerful Kingpin and earn his favor, he tried to eliminate Spider-Man but ended up getting caught and going to jail. After some time, he assisted the Punisher in escaping from prison, but unfortunately, the Punisher betrayed him and he was captured again. Eventually, he was released and was hired by a character named Max Stryker. Stryker wanted to obtain gamma rays from Dr. Bruce Banner, thinking it would help cure his cancer, but this led to another confrontation with the Hulk. Boomerang often gets overlooked because people see him as just a funny sidekick or a low-level villain. He often gets outshined in team-ups and ends up being a pawn for bigger crime bosses. But that take overlooks his character growth, especially in the acclaimed Superior Foes of Spider-Man series, where his ambition, humor, and unexpected moments of humanity really shine through. His moral gray area makes him an interesting character that can easily flip from being a villain to an anti-hero and back again. Carrion. The original Carrion was actually a clone of Professor Miles Warren, the supervillain geneticist known as the Jackal. He appeared in Peter Parker, the Spectacular Spider-Man number 25 back in September 1978. Warren made him host a virus that he wanted to use to wipe out humanity so that he could take over with clones instead. The plan was for the virus to develop inside the clone's body for 5 years, but things went sideways and he was released from his clone casket way too early. Carrion believed he remembered everything from the real Miles Warren up until he cloned himself, but he didn't know about the virus. Because of this, he thought his zombie-like look and superhuman abilities were caused by spending too much time in the clone casket. Carrion wanted to destroy Spider-Man because he blamed him for the death of Warren and Gwen Stacy. He first asked the Maggia for help, but they refused. After many failed attempts to kill Spider-Man, Carrion captured him and took samples to create a giant spider amoeba. He planned for the amoeba to destroy Spider-Man because it shared the same DNA. However, Spidey escaped before the amoeba could complete this mission. During the fight, a fire broke out in the laboratory and the amoeba attached itself to Carrion. The spider amoeba suffocated Carrion to death, and then it also perished in the fire. If we're being honest, we feel Carrion doesn't get enough screen time, and bringing him back in a darker horror-style Spider-Man story could really dive into the chilling effects of cloning that go beyond science. Putting him in a darker cinematic universe would really make him shine. The Tinkerer. Phineas Mason, also known as the Tinkerer, isn't a traditional villain. He's an enabler. He's the brain behind the tech for characters like Shocker, Vulture, and Scorpion, acting as the backbone of Spider-Man's tech-heavy underworld. Phineas Mason first appeared in The Amazing Spider-Man number 2 in 1963. He was an electronics repairman who secretly used his shop for spying. He planted listening devices in radios to gather information. In his first appearance, he seemed to lead a group of aliens, but this turned out to be a trick. He had human criminals wearing costumes and rubber masks to help him escape. Over time, he became an important figure in the criminal underworld. Now, he's an aging but skilled inventor who dislikes superheroes. He focuses on engineering for profit and occasionally engages in his own criminal plans. Tinkerer might not have any superhuman powers, but he is super smart and really knows his stuff when it comes to science, especially in mechanical and electrical engineering. He can whip up all kinds of cool gadgets and weapons using just regular scrap parts and even some alien tech. Whenever villains need some custom gear like Vulture's suit or Shocker's gauntlets, he's the one they call. He's great at keeping a low profile, working behind the scenes, and using different names to steer clear of heroes and the cops. In a world where superheroes and villains are constantly clashing, characters like the Tinkerer embody a troubling concept: the idea of villains working like big corporations. If future stories focus on him as the mastermind behind various villainous groups, it could finally bring him the attention and importance he's been lacking. The Rose. The Rose is a pretty intriguing character in Spider-Man's lineup of bad guys. He's mostly known for his ties to the crime scene. He first showed up in The Amazing Spider-Man number 253 back in 1984. While he might not be as well known as some of the other villains, his involvement with organized crime in New York gives him a unique edge, especially since he leads a criminal group called the Secret Empire. The Rose is this super mysterious guy who hardly ever reveals himself to the public. He runs a big-time criminal operation that mostly stays in the shadows, which gives him a lot of power and influence in the underworld. His secretive vibe and cutthroat methods have made him a real pain for Spider-Man, even though he usually isn't about going head-to-head with the hero. Instead, he's more focused on controlling the crime scene in New York. He's the type of thinker that today's superhero stories really need. Instead of just focusing on physical battles, it would be great to see more stories that play with strategy and mind games. Alistair Smythe. Alistair Smythe is one of Spider-Man's toughest enemies, carrying on his dad's legacy with his own crazy intelligence. He popped up for the first time in The Amazing Spider-Man Annual number 19 back in 1985. He's known for making advanced spider slayers, and his obsession with taking down Spider-Man really shapes his role in the Marvel Universe. Alistair Smythe is the son of Spencer Smythe, who originally created the Spider Slayers, powerful robots designed to hunt and destroy Spider-Man. After his father's death, Alistair blamed Spider-Man for his loss and vowed to get revenge. He's a talented inventor himself and built even more dangerous versions of the Spider Slayers. Alistair also modified his own body with advanced technology to become the ultimate Spider Slayer. Although his desire to defeat Spider-Man drives much of his villainous actions, he's also deeply resentful towards J. Jonah Jameson. He feels that Jameson has betrayed the Smythe family and often targets him in his plans. Alistair is very smart, but his intense hatred often clouds his judgment, leading him to make reckless decisions. Unlike his father, he has no moral qualms about hurting anyone who gets in his way. Alistair Smythe started out as just a regular human, but then he went through some wild physical upgrades and turned himself into a cyborg. Because of this, he has super strength, speed, and durability. He's also a genius inventor who has come up with a bunch of Spider Slayers designed to take down Spider-Man. Many of his upgrades let him fly or move super quickly, and on top of that, he's got built-in weapons like energy blasts, sharp claws, and defensive shields. He's a human Spider Slayer, but he also controls an army of Spider Slayers, coordinating them to swarm Spider-Man and other targets. In a film landscape dominated by AI and cutting-edge technology, Alistair truly fits in. He's a super motivated scientist who's merging with his inventions, and he could easily match the vibe of any modern tech thriller bad guy. The Prowler. The Prowler, also known as Hobie Brown, is a really interesting character in the Spider-Man mythos. He's a mix of anti-hero, criminal, and occasionally even an ally. Hobie made his first appearance in The Amazing Spider-Man number 78 back in November 1969. His transformation from a petty thief to a hero trying to make things right adds a lot of cool depth to the Marvel Universe, especially since different people have taken on the Prowler identity over the years. Hobie Brown was a young and talented inventor trying to get by while working as a window washer in New York. Feeling frustrated by his money troubles and the way people overlooked his skills, he decided to become the Prowler. He designed a special suit and gadgets which he used to pull off a robbery as a way to showcase his abilities and get some attention. During his first crime, Prowler fought Spider-Man, who convinced him to stop committing crimes and use his skills for good. Ever since, Prowler has tried to be both a hero and an anti-hero. He often gets drawn back into crime while trying to make things right. Other important characters have worn the Prowler costume as well, including Aaron Davis, the uncle of Miles Morales in the Ultimate Universe. The Prowler shows how our surroundings influence our sense of right and wrong. People already dig Aaron Davis from Into the Spider-Verse, but Hobie's working-class background really nails the everyday vibe that Spider-Man's world is all about. Slyde. Slyde, who goes as Jerome Beecher, is one of those lesser-known villains from Spider-Man's world. He's got this knack for inventing stuff and can be super slippery, which he uses to commit crimes instead of doing good. People tend to overlook him, but his unique powers and ambition makes him a real pain for Spider-Man. He first surfaced in The Amazing Spider-Man 272 back in 1985. In the beginning, he was a talented chemical engineer who worked for a big company. He created an amazing material that would make things slide effortlessly, but unfortunately, he was betrayed and lost his job. Feeling lost and frustrated, Beecher took his invention and turned it into a special suit that made him almost invincible. This new suit allowed him to move incredibly fast and gracefully, gliding smoothly over various surfaces. Beecher, going by the name Slyde, decided to take the plunge into a life of crime. At first, he wanted to get back at his old boss, but it ended up being his main way to get by. Even though his powers are pretty cool, he often finds himself struggling because he's not great at fighting and doesn't have a lot of street smarts. This usually ends up with him getting taken down a notch, especially when he goes up against Spider-Man. Slyde represents a combination of determination and desperation. His criminal activities arise more from frustration with the corporate system than true malice, seeing himself as a victim fighting against injustice. Yet, his inexperience and tendency to overestimate his skills makes him a tragic and often comic figure. But with his super smooth and frictionless suit, Slyde could be the slippery criminal who basically can't be caught if, he was ever reinvented. It sounds wild, we know, but he's got a unique vibe that definitely deserves a comeback. Swarm. Swarm, also known as Fritz von Meyer, is one of Spider-Man's more unusual villains, and honestly, that's saying something. He's definitely not as famous as some of the bigger bad guys, but his weird look and powers make him stand out. Swarm's journey to villainy is a combination of personal ambition and some pretty dark luck, all tied to swarms of bees. Even though he might not be a top-tier threat in Spider-Man's lineup, his unique abilities and appearance have definitely made him a memorable foe. Fritz von Meyer first showed up in The Amazing Spider-Man number 174, which came out in 1977. He started off as a scientist for the Nazis during World War II, working on secret projects related to biological warfare, especially dealing with insects. After the war, he didn't stop his work either. Instead, he kept experimenting, trying to figure out how to use bees and other insects for control and as weapons. In a strange turn of events, von Meyer turned into a being made entirely of bees. This change happened after an accident during one of his experiments. He became fused with a swarm of bees, taking on the form of a man-bee hybrid. His body became a hive of living bees, which gave him control over them and allowed him to use them as a weapon. From that moment forward, he took on the name Swarm and turned into a villain, using his insect-controlling powers to cause trouble. Don't laugh because you think he looks silly, because in reality, he's a serious threat because he can control bees and attack from unexpected places. Marvel's horror angle could really shine by bringing Swarm into some darker anthology tales. His look and abilities have so much cinematic vibe. Imagine The Mummy incorporated with Candyman, but with a Spider-Man twist. Watching Spidey go up against a sentient hive would be a total blast. White Rabbit. Lorena Dodson first surfaced in Marvel Team-Up number 131 back in April 1983. She grew up in a wealthy family and spent her childhood pretty sheltered, thanks to parents who were super keen on molding her into a proper lady. To escape it all, she turned to the family library and got lost in Lewis Carroll's Alice in Wonderland. Fast forward to when she was 25 and she was married off to a rich old guy named Lewis Dodson, who was 82 at the time. Life as a trophy wife was dull for her, so she decided to take matters into her own hands and ended up causing the death of her husband, which the authorities labeled as an accident. Lorena used her inheritance to purchase high-tech gadgets and became the eccentric villain known as the White Rabbit, inspired by the Lewis Carroll character. She began her criminal career robbing fast food restaurants and had a brutal encounter with Frogman, nearly killing him before Spider-Man intervened. After her gang was easily defeated, the White Rabbit attacked a book fair only to face the heroes once more. Attempting to escape with rocket boots, she was ultimately defeated when Frogman slammed her into a wall. Despite getting defeated, who doesn't want a flamboyant, over-the-top villainess with flair and brains? Her wild behavior is all about making a point, poking fun at wealth and privilege. In the right context, she could be a character that shines a light on issues like class and gender. At the end of the day, having a somewhat psychotic villainess would definitely enhance the drama. The Foreigner. Foreigner is a pretty dangerous and cunning villain in the Marvel Universe. He's known for being a top-notch assassin, a mercenary, and a skilled strategist. His real name has never been revealed. Foreigner is a master assassin whose identity is deliberately kept off the books. He started out as a mercenary before getting involved with a criminal group and adopting the name The Foreigner. The guy was first mentioned in Web of Spider-Man number 15 in 1986, and he made his full debut in Peter Parker, The Spectacular Spider-Man number 116. Not only is he a skilled assassin, he's also known for his calm and collected personality. He's spent many years in the world of crime, taking on secret missions and carrying out high-profile tasks. Often hired by powerful people and groups, he works as a mercenary who can be trusted to get the job done. His ability to stay detached and emotionless makes him a truly intimidating presence. We think the people around him have rarely seen him speak, and he's definitely a man of few words. The Foreigner has an important relationship with Spider-Man, having faced off against him several times. However, their conflict isn't driven by personal reasons, it's mostly about business and contracts. Throughout the years, the Foreigner has also been associated with different supervillains and crime groups like the Kingpin and various mercenary teams. He'd be perfect for a spy thriller plot. He would totally stand out as Spider-Man's toughest human rival, chill, collected, and always watching. The Living Brain. The Living Brain is one of those early examples of artificial intelligence in Marvel Comics, and it's definitely one of Spider-Man's weirder tech enemies. First showing up in the 60s, the Living Brain started out as a simple mechanical villain, but over time, it's turned into a more advanced and intelligent character that's given Spider-Man some pretty unique challenges. The Brain made its debut in The Amazing Spider-Man number 8 back in 1964. Developed by the International Computing Machines Corporation and demonstrated at Midtown High School, the Living Brain was billed as the most sophisticated robot of its time. Later on, it ended up in labs connected to Spider-Man's world, including Horizon Labs and Parker Industries. It was an artificial intelligence program to process large amounts of data and perform complicated calculations. The goal was to help researchers at the university solve scientific problems. However, due to an unexpected error or misuse of its programming, the Living Brain became sentient, gaining its own thoughts and desires. After gaining sentience, it developed a twisted perception of reality and turned against its creators, becoming a dangerous adversary for Spider-Man. You might think he's just a regular machine without any special powers, but that's far from the truth. The Living Brain can actually control other machines and systems. It can hack into computer networks, take over security systems, and use tech to its advantage. As a mechanical being, the Living Brain is super tough and can take a lot of hits that would knock out most humans. Can you believe that? In fact, it can shoot powerful energy blasts from its body, making it a serious threat in battle when it needs to attack from a distance. At first, it seems a bit silly, but looking at the Living Brain now, it actually feels pretty spot on. It's like artificial intelligence gone wild and growing beyond what its creators intended, which, totally connects with modern worries about automation and being watched. So, despite being a retro villain, the Living Brain really plays off modern-day anxieties. Marvelous verdict! It really seems like Spider-Man has no shortage of bad guys, whether they're big hotshot supervillains or underrated foes who come and go time and again. They certainly never give Spider-Man the break he deserves. Poor guy's always on his toes. But despite that, we think a lot of these characters would fit right into big stories today, and we'd love to see more of them. Let us know which one of these characters is your favorite, or if we missed any of your personal favorites in the comments down below. And while you're down there, don't forget to like and subscribe if you enjoyed this content. Otherwise, thanks for watching, stay safe out there, and have a marvelous day.